See that okay? Is that coming up?
Yes.
Awesome. And so we're on week 6. We're risking temptation. You know, that picture is those are olive trees in Gethsemane. That's what those are. And so found that we found a bunch of them. It's kind of blurry, but I was looked at some other pictures of the place and what they were talking about, the Mount of Olives, and they're thick, they're old. They're just how it just looks like it looks like an ancient place. You know, it just does. It looks like an ancient place. But let's start with this verse here. This is the one from Luke. He came out and went, as it was custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into that time of trial." Then he withdrew with them about a stone's throw, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. When he got up from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping because of grief. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this day and for the opportunity once again to move deeper into the scripture, to think about the ways that you have come into our life, the things you have done for us, things you've done for people that we love and care about, and to contemplate once again what it is that we can do that might be more like what you would do, that how we could live our lives in ways that reflect your love and how you were in this world when you walked among us. Encourage us tonight by your word so that we might live out and be an encourager to others with our deeds. In your son's name I pray, amen. Well, let me find my place, and we got it. So this is the last night. We know that. And we are looking at Gethsemane and the prayers, how he prayed, and the different ways that is stated. And if you read in the book, we're going to go right to Amy, but I wanted to ask you a couple things. So consider a time when you had to take a risk and be courageous. Like when you were a time when it may have been even a little dangerous or something to you, what you felt like, whether it was physically or emotionally or in some way. But that if you can think of a time, there's a couple other things. Like, well, I'll just ask, can you think of an occasion when you had to do that? Maybe like you had to risk, even like you felt like you was risking a job or something, but you had to step up.
Well, yeah, I have a couple times like that myself, but the last one was when we were in California and had the fire all around us, and we had to evacuate.
Oh, right.
And I mean, it was really nasty. It's fire all over the road. We were driving over top of it, and I just said a little prayer. Well, that's one of those prayers that you say for yourself, you know.
Well, yeah, she covered that, but we talked. It's right. She talks about that though. It's yeah, exactly. Okay. So it sounds like you're saying, like, though, that did the prayers help? Did you feel that it did? Well, maybe not in the moment. I wondered what was that like though when you prayed? Did you feel any peace immediately, or did you know, as you got farther down the road, how did it help you?
Yeah, the further we got down the road, the more we got out of the fire, and then we got into the Sonoma area, and we tried to get a motel, and it was all gone. Everybody was gone. But anyhow, it's a good thing we didn't, because the fires came through Sonoma also. So we had to go another 35 miles at 3:00 in the morning, and finally got
right
the last rooms they had. And we felt relieved. Yes, it was a very big relief.
Did you know it was better when friends stopped yelling in your ear, "Watch out for that tree! Watch out for that!"
That's when I knew it was okay.
You better keep an eye out for deer.
The first place we stopped, there was no room in the inn.
Oh, I'll bet, because people were fleeing, weren't they?
Yes.
Huh, that is that would have been an eerie time, and for sure.
Well, we found out that the Lord did answer the prayers, because when we got a couple of hours sleep that night,
Right.
got up the next morning, and the hotel was full of local people that didn't have any place to go. They all came into the hotel, sleeping on the floors and the chairs, and the hotel was wonderful. They brought food in for the people.
Right.
Man, it's just great.
That is awesome. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, I want us to go ahead and play our video here. I will share correctly this time. Let me go this. We'll stop that share, and we will find it here. Where are you, buddy? There you are. We're on 6. Find the right one. Let's see if I got this turned. Ooh, it's real too high. Turn that down. You doing okay?
Yeah.
We sometimes talk about the Garden of Gethsemane, and already we have problems. In the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, we have Gethsemane. John gives us a garden. But let's think about that garden for a minute. It was in the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve faced temptation and they failed. But now at Gethsemane, in John's garden, Jesus himself will face temptation, and the temptation of the most difficult sort. Not one coming from Satan, not one coming from someone else, but his own personal temptation to flee or to accept the cross. When Jesus prays, Father, let this cup pass from me, let's not pass over that cup too quickly. When we think about cups in the scriptures of Israel, we might think about the psalm, my cup runneth over. We think of love and compassion and joy and happiness. But this is a different type of cup in Gethsemane. This is a cup of fate, of torture, of death. It's not a cup from which Jesus wants to drink. And we should also think about the cup that Jesus shared with his followers at his Last Supper. And when Jesus hands his followers that cup, when people participate in that cup during a church service, what kind of cup is one drinking? A cup of happiness and joy, a cup of bitterness, a cup of temptation, a cup of community. Think about the cup rather than just pass it by. In Paul's epistle to the Philippians, chapter 2, he has this beautiful poem. It might actually be a hymn, in which he talks about how the Christ was in the form of God, but didn't feel the necessity of grasping that divinity. But the Christ empties himself out, takes on human form, indeed the form of a slave. What does it mean to give up all your privilege, to give up all your power, to become a servant, indeed a slave for everyone? That's one of the teachings that Jesus offers, and more than just talking about it, he actually does it. When Jesus says, let this cup pass from me, he doesn't want to suffer crucifixion. He doesn't want to die. But that's not a sign of lack of faith in God. To the contrary, it's a sign of enormous faith. Indeed, it's what prophets frequently do. Jeremiah doesn't want to be a prophet. It's hard to be a prophet. It's even harder to accept the fate of a prophet. So Jesus, like Jeremiah, doesn't want to drink from that cup. And he recognizes he has a choice here. He prays to God to say, here's how I feel. And he knows that God will love him, indeed, regardless of the choice that he makes. And because he is confident in that love, he can choose the fate he needs to choose. Jesus brings his disciples with him to Gethsemane, and he takes three of them, the three who witnessed his own transfiguration, Peter, James, and John. And he says, "Pray with me, stay awake." But they fall asleep, and Jesus prays, and he comes back to his friends, but rather than watching and remaining awake, they have fallen asleep. "Could you not stay awake just a little while longer?" he asks. And he goes to pray again, and again they fall asleep. The insiders, the ones who witnessed him in all his glory, who heard his teaching, who saw his miracles, cannot stay awake, cannot meet his need. And the irony is that while the insiders fail him, the outsiders remain true. The anointing woman, whose name we do not have in Matthew and Mark, she represents fidelity. She's there, as Jesus says, to anoint him for his burial. And when Jesus dies, it's the centurion, the Roman army officer, who is with him when he dies and who is able to proclaim him Son of God. So the Gospels ask, are you an insider? Are you an outsider? Have you failed? Have you remained true? And if you have failed, if you have fallen asleep, recognize that there's still a continuation of your story as well. When Jesus goes to Gethsemane, he knows he is going to be arrested. He knows he is going to die. And this was his choice. When he prays, "Let this cup pass from me," he knows that that's a possibility. Indeed, he did not have to go to Gethsemane. He did not have to allow Judas to engage in the betrayal. He could have run away. He had a choice, but he doesn't. He stays to accept his fate because he has trust in God that everything will work out according to divine plan. When the Gospels were first taught, they weren't taught in little snippets or little lectionary readings. They were performed from the beginning to the end, as today we might, for example, see a movie. And what happens in the Gospels, as with any good symphony, with any good movie, themes repeat. Gethsemane echoes not only the temptation of Jesus by Satan in the wilderness, but it also echoes the Our Father. When Jesus teaches his followers to pray, "Lead us not into temptation." Now, Jesus himself is brought into temptation. He doesn't ask from his followers anything more than he himself has experienced and has endured. In Christian theology, Jesus is God, but he's also fully human, with all of our emotions, our fears, our temptations, and our strengths. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus is arrested on the evening of Passover, and the Last Supper would have been a Passover meal, a Passover Seder. The Passover celebrates not only the exodus of the Israelite slaves from Egypt, but also the passing over of the angel of death, so that the Jewish children are not killed. And what do we have here in Gethsemane? We have a type of Passover as well, but in this case, on this evening, the Son of God, God's firstborn Son, according to Christian theology, on this night, he will be condemned to death.
Okay. So let me ask you. Hold on, let me find my share button again. Here we go. All right, so read through Luke. Let's go through the Markan version. She talked about that. Now let me read this to you. And what I'd like for you to do is that when I want to pause in certain spots, okay? And when I pause there, what I would like for you to do is, I would like you to imagine what, what would be the internal dialogue of the person who would be narrating this? I mean, or think if they were there, like what would they be thinking? And so let's talk about Peter, James, and John. So in your own minds, as you imagine that you're one of them here in this scene, when I pause, just think about what might be going through your mind there in that moment, okay? I'll start it. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." Now I'll pause. So what were some things that you think that might have been going through in their own internal thoughts and feelings and stuff at that time when this part came up, when Jesus said, "I'm so grieved, even to death. Stay here with me"?
I think it's the age-old question. Why, Lord, are you doing this?
You mean like, why are you asking us to sit here with you, or
Just
still,
why?
still wrestling with why the plan that you laid out about your death and all that? Why that part?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think they got it.
Well, what kinds of things do you think they were what would their confusion maybe have sounded like? What kind of questions would they have had in that moment, do you think?
Well, why he went by himself? I just don't think they got the gravity of the situation yet.
Right. Okay. And one of the things I thought was that, when we read the other ones, I mean, this is a place that Jesus went to often, and said, which was with John? Now I'm confused. Which one's when John? It was like, he often met the disciples in this place because Judas knew where to go and stuff. This was a familiar place, and they often came here I guess, for teaching, and Jesus would come here to pray a lot too. So, yeah. Let me read this next section, and then I'll pause and ask you to process inside a little bit more what they might be, Peter, James, and John might be thinking. And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." So what do you think is going through Jesus' mind now? This is a Jesus internal thought. Think for just a moment, then I'll come back to you. What kinds of things do you think was going on as Jesus was saying and praying this? What kinds of things do you think was going on inside him? What kind of things was he thinking or saying to himself?
I think he knew what he had to do, but he told God how he felt as a human, but he was still willing to carry out his wishes.
Okay. Very good.
The human part of him was still fighting against his loyalty to God, and he was just confused.
See, I don't And when I look at this, I think of like, this is the only way I can make it, not some set up game that, it's like where, Jesus really does know the outcome fully. And, so he knows, like, if I do this, and when I as soon as I come through the door after 3 days, I'm okay. I have to rely on the idea that, he was a human being, and that, even with, like, when Paul talks about declared to be Son of God through the resurrection, power of resurrection, that, or when Peter talks about in Acts 2:10, here was a man approved by God, and that resurrection is the stamp on all that he did. He was faithful all the way, perfectly faithful all the way through. And so he is the one that is the first fruits. But that this whole thing of that, who wants to die? And who wants to die badly? Right? That's just nobody. Not even, we hear it here, not even Jesus. But the powerfulness, and I wrote down here what she said in that thing. She talked about how, it made me jump in, but this just shows how much trust he had, but nevertheless, thy will be done. Well, let me finish this, and then we'll come for some more monologue, internal stuff. He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour is come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Now think just a moment on what you think is going on in their hearts and minds. What do you think is going on with the disciples when he came back once and then a third time and they were still asleep? What do you think was going on with them?
Maybe they actually did know what was going on, and they were overtaken with grief.
Okay. That was one. What verse was that? 2. Yeah. What else? What do you think Jesus is thinking about them?
I think he was a little bit sad and let down by them, but I think he also got to the point that he said, okay, I accept it now. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. How does Jesus speak to God in these prayers?
I think he was asking God to take the pain away from what's going to happen, the fear.
Okay.
Take the cup away from him, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he was honest?
Honest?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do.
Laid it all out there, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Honest. But also too, there's a, it's not a realization. He belies his own trust in saying, but nevertheless, talking about, because Mitzi was talking about, and somebody else said something about, he's just accepted it. He's going now, that it's nevertheless, your will be done. That whole level of faith and trust and obedience that kind of thing comes. It's not that we want the outcome, but that he doesn't. It's not that this is what he wants. It's like he says, but in the end, may your will be done. And I know that we always think we most often think that that means that. But see, that's more like the prayer in the Lord's Prayer, right? When he talks about "Thy will be done," it's an all-encompassing thing, even in this prayer. And so, even if it would be God's will that it was taken from him, right? Nevertheless, thy will be done. May not be what I want, but in all things may your will be done. And so it's not just that the will is that he dies. It's about God's will all the time in that sense. And so that's one thing in this when he says, thy will be done. It's not just in this moment. Jesus says that all the time. And every time we pray that prayer on Sundays together, we're saying that too. For our life, for the life of the world, for all things, may your will be done. And then we have to consider some of the times what is that will in a moment.
Yes.
Hey, how is this a model for our own prayers? How Jesus prays here?
One word just popped into my mind. That is acceptance.
Okay. When do you think he had it? Like you said there a minute ago, when he said enough, it's time, it's go.
Yeah.
He got to that point, and that he had done that. But I wonder in this too, like, when did he really accept it? Because he accepted this part to this point, but he still doesn't know how it's going to turn out. He has the best idea, maybe. He knows he's going to, it's where it's going to be. He knows what's in the hearts of the Pharisees. He knows what the people are doing. He knows things there. But, in the end, I still think he was, why would he not hope that God would, until the beating starts, till the crown comes on and all that somehow, Lord, you deliver me from this if possible, but nevertheless, thy will be done every step along the way.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted it, but who would want it? And why would you want it? You're just doing what you think you're supposed to do. And you just trust that it's going to turn out some way right.
Yeah.
What did, and Bev, I know you've prayed that prayer. You've prayed like that before. I know you have. And I know the same all of you have. Whether you're praying for a spouse or you're praying for a parent or a child or whatever, that you want it to be different. But if it can't be different in the moment, then you just, thy will be done. And even if that will includes the peace for you, each one of you that have done that. I believe that. You've had that. So the disciples failed to stay awake. So think of something maybe when you felt like you have failed, when you think you failed, and then how have you felt God's redemption?
Wow.
That's a hard question, I think. Especially how have you felt God's redemption? Because some people don't really, they struggle with taking redemption in. There are people that just feel guilt. It is not that they want it, but that's how they're built for now. When you felt like you failed, but yet how do you find how you felt God's redemption? Well, I don't think they felt redemption right away. I mean, we know that they didn't because of the way that it plays out over the next couple of days. But what Dr. Levine says, though, is that when they did wake up, they resorted to violence. And so, and it's always kind of a Christian struggle of how we're supposed to use violence, how we respond to injustices, because this was an injustice to Jesus. And then how do we respond, and even how we would use violence. If I make this statement, Christians should always seek to find an alternative to violence. I want to look at these two passages here. Okay. There's the Luke and the John passages. And so this is when he comes out and we see these. So let's read through them. This is Luke. While he was still speaking, suddenly a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. And I know that didn't feel good. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, Judas, is it with a kiss that you're betraying the Son of Man? When those who were around him saw what was coming, they asked, Lord, should we strike with the sword? Then one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple police, and the elders who had come for him, have you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a bandit? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. And John, after Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with the disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and the disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked him, who are you looking for? They answered, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus replied, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, I am he, they stepped back and fell to the ground. And he asked them, who are you looking for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, let these men go. This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, put your sword back into its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me? And so now he's back to talking about the cup there. Can you think of a time? I got some questions here to talk about these. If we need to go back, we will. Can you think of a time when you think a violent response, and here's some good examples, protecting another person, being sent on a military mission is warranted? That it might be appropriate to give a violent response.
Wow.
Well, but I mean, if somebody breaks into your house and you're at night you're in bed, I mean, is that a time when you could use violence to protect your person and the people in your family?
Yeah, I think it is, no doubt.
Yeah. And she had the discussion in the book too that talked about, like first responders, or policemen, firemen, soldiers, others that go on, that sign on for jobs that put them in harm's way, but yet, and they're on missions. No, the violence is, if you're sent on a military mission, is that a time when it's how you have, what you have to do, because you're on that, that's the kind of thing here. And as she thought about this and the way she discussed it, personally, what I thought of was things like, I should not dismiss violence for everything. And that's what people like liberation theologians would talk about, that developed out of like in the 70s, 80s, the revolution in Central America, like Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and how the governments just were so oppressive. And like even people like Bishop Romero who was killed and assassinated, and I shared his story one time, was that, if someone's abusing the people, then whatever you got to do to get them off, get them off. And Dr. Johnson was a world religions professor I had, he was South African. He says, man, if a man has got a guy, if someone has somebody in a ditch and they're kicking the life out of him, he said, you don't pray for the man, you get the man off his back. And that's what you do. And he said, it's not cut and dried simple. The things that I thought about were so appropriate was as we've into the third day of the George Floyd, the trial for the officer that is charged with his murder, and the testimony of people that said, I wish I'd done more to get him off there. But here, this is, they're police officers and they're armed and they're right there. Would it have been appropriate for that crowd to have rushed those officers and gotten him off of him? Not to set that man free, but to save his life. That's rough. But let's move. How does Jesus react to the disciples when they act violently in his defense? What did you hear?
He said, don't do that. And he put the ear back on the slave.
Yeah,
but
he did that on the one story. And the other story, he didn't seal the guy.
Yeah, but it gets me how sometimes when we lose our anger, how we strike the weaker person that's not even involved. You see what I'm saying? Like they cut the slave's ear off.
Oh, yeah. He was just doing what yeah, you're right.
Slave.
No, I hadn't thought about that part. Why didn't he cut the high priest ear off or one of the priests' ear off?
Yeah.
You just lash out in instances like that, and you don't think before you do. Right.
And anybody can get it. But it's like, but even in this one, so I'm angry at with something that happens that maybe like from the school board office, but I take it out on the kids in the class.
Yes, exactly.
That's what you're talking about, that where we direct it. We don't go right at the cause, the direction of my anger, but it deflects to somewhere else. Okay.
And I think that's what Jesus might have been thinking and saying at that point in time. Don't do that to this guy, And
he's just a pawn.
Right.
Okay. Well, the other thing that he talked about too was, if you remember, and he says this, he said, hey, there's more at play here than just this. This isn't the whole game right here. I got to drink. I got to go drink. Do you think this is going to I need to go drink from this cup? Okay. I got to go and do this part. The other thing I thought was interesting is that because you see like those who live by the sword die by the sword, and how often that's used as a anti-violence thing to say, oh, that means we're not supposed to do anything.
Oh, it is. Yes.
But when she said in this, she talked about, no, it's just in the book. She was like, no, it's an observation. This can get you killed. And so you really should think about how, and I think that's why, like within the nonviolent, like civil rights movement, right? They knew that, and even those poor folks that were bystanders when George Floyd died on that day, they could not fight that power. There was power there that was in the way, and they knew that if they acted against that it would be that they themselves might be killed. If like in the civil rights movement, if you struck back at what's his name down in Birmingham or wherever that one was, if you struck back against him, they'd just shoot you. It wasn't with a water hose that time. And so there are things that, because we're talking about like things that are injustices, how we react against that. Yeah, it's just good. It's not just good advice. It's truth, I guess. And so he says, don't do this, because Jesus knew they could not win that. They could not win it. Let them go. Are there other gospel stories that might help us understand how Jesus views violence? I'm racking my brain on this. And the only thing I was thinking about is things like within the Good Friday stuff where he doesn't fight, But I don't think that was because he didn't want to defend himself. I think it was he couldn't defend himself. I said, what are other stories where he could maybe see something about violence? I've been through the Sermon on the Mount in my head. Pray for your enemies. that kind of stuff. Those are stories. Maybe that lends us this, instead of acting out and gaining vengeance or whatever, doing them harm, that we pray for them, wish good things for them. Thought about that one. What else? Anybody have anything else? Okay. Well, one of the things that, and this was going back to, some comments that she made about like police officers, soldiers, those kinds of folks. And that like, what are, and like, even like we talk about our frontline healthcare workers, right? And the dangers that they face. What kind of challenges do police officers, what kind of challenges do they face, risk in their careers?
Wow. Oh my gosh. I can think of Bill Broadwell, who was a deputy sheriff in Giles County. And
that's the bridge.
He went to serve a warrant on this guy and he shot him through the door and killed him. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was Fran's uncle.
Oh.
It's like every day you don't know what you're going to be presented with.
And like, you think about even our paramedics in Newport, EMT, they don't know. They get called to a scene. They don't know what they're going to face there.
That's true.
They don't. And it's just, and they may not even think about that, or like they just go to somebody's house. Now, a lot of people know stories in the community and who about this family, what they're going through and things that are happening there. But you just don't know they don't know what they're going to face. They're in danger. Well, here's the thing that, what kind of prayers do you think they pray? I wanted to do I wanted to get, let's go to this one first. No, not that one. I want to go back to this. I want to not cheat that yet. Now we go back. What kind of prayers do you think like the people who are in harm's way pray?
Oh, wow.
She said something about this when she was talking about,
Yeah.
and it was in the reading. She talked about that and said, like, what kind of prayers they pray, and even, think about that. You go out, you're a police officer. I remember it was Roger Lilly was a state trooper and Beckley police officer. No, he's a state trooper, and he was because it was my birthday in 1975 or so. He pulled a guy over and dude just blew him away. And his brother Dickie was a jailer and worked part-time at Stone and Thomas and doing like store security stuff. That's how I knew Dickie. But they just blown away, just pulling somebody over for a speeding ticket. Guy wasn't a nut job or anything. The guy just shot him. You see that. I wonder how many folks every day that will do those kinds of jobs think, well, I hope I get home tonight. I wonder.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fewer and fewer more, but I don't know what we would do without people that help us and defend us.
No, we have to have people who can help keep order and yes, safety, public safety. Well, let's do this. Let's think of and write. First, I'm going to write it down. And let's imagine that we are, what would be a prayer that we would pray for the day? If we were one of those people, whether it's a fireman, a soldier, frontline healthcare worker, police officer. What might we pray? Oh Lord, what would follow?
Let me return home safely.
My dad was in World War II, and he would not talk too much about it.
Right.
But I was with him one day, took him to another man that he was in the army with, and they were both in France and Italy. And they were telling a story. Dad was telling a story about walking over top of people that were dead, and Dad got shot in the arm. And I remember him saying, "Get me out of here." To that guy, he said, "That's all I wanted to do, just get away from it, just leave."
Right on.
So he did. He got back to England, where he was in the hospital. So and that stuck with me for years.
Let me get out of here. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of Jesus's prayer, isn't it? Get me out of this if you
did.
can.
Yeah. Take this junk from me.
Yeah. What else do they pray? Look, do you think they would only pray about themselves? What about their job? How might you pray? How would you might want to pray about how you do your job if you're one of the, because those people, what kind of a mentality does someone who does that kind of work have in relation to the rest of the world?
Oh my gosh. Mm-mm. I think we found out more about the soldiers that went to Vietnam and came back and are still suffering to this day from the mentality of the whole thing.
And because some of them it never leaves them. And like that's what they're talking about with coming out of these soldiers who are doing these 3, 2, 3, and 4 deployments now, have been over in Afghanistan, Iraq, over and over and over, the toll that it's taken on them mentally, emotionally, the number of suicides we're seeing out of this generation of soldiers, it's tremendous. It's more than at any other time. And even with Vietnam. Again, I said one time, Bill Mahoney was a man who lived in the woods down behind the school in Eccles. And I thought it was Korea, but Dad just said, no, he'd come back from Vietnam and just couldn't live with people. He was just down there. He struggled in mental health. It was bad. But I guess, what would you, when you went out on that day and don't you want to do something good? And that's why I just think that police officers they're servants. You know what I mean? They want to serve and take care of, serve and protect, serve and defend, take care of, do something with purpose. How would you word a sentence maybe for a prayer talking about how you want your day to go?
Well, you'd pray for a peaceful resolution to whatever you face that day.
Okay.
Pray for an uneventful day.
Uneventful day. Peaceful resolutions, uneventful day, a day. I guess you wouldn't. I think I would say something like, "Let all my actions benefit somebody." Well, I'll let what I have to do today, whatever comes, help somebody. I don't have to use violence. None is used against me. But would you add, nevertheless, thy will be done to any of this?
Whoa.
I just was thinking about that because every time, she said that, let me return home safely. Nevertheless, let thy will be done. Pray for a peaceful resolution. Nevertheless, let thy will be done. Uneventful day. Nevertheless, let thy will be done. Help me to do some good today. Nevertheless, thy will be done. And
I
that's
do
not
that.
part of the thing she gave us, but I just thought about that.
I do that about every day in my prayers, Roger. If I'm praying for healing for someone, or depending on the situation,
Right.
I say, Lord, if it's your will, may this person be healed, or may this person recover from their accident, or
Right. We'll move to this next piece in just a second, but one of the things was, I remember Dr. Tupper one time in one class, it was our Christology classes where we just took a time, and it was a whole semester of just books about Jesus and the study of Jesus and the Gospels and different portrayals and how you got through, and then the literature around it and stuff. And he was talking, and then it was this class on providence, which is how God provides and deals with us in the world and takes care of things. And he said, and we were talking about the God who is like a 3 A's, we call the 3 A's God, anytime, anywhere, anything. That's the way God operates. And then he was telling me, he said, and even in scripture, it's not, God is not a 3A God where God has done anytime, anything. And even when Jesus prayed in Mark, the translation in the Greek is, if it be possible, let this cup pass. But saying that maybe it's not. And we tend to think of that as, well, in terms of the plan. But it's how does God operate in our world, and what do we really see and how things tend to operate? And our questions are, why was this person healed and this person not? Was it God's will not for that one to suffer, but not for this person over here? Or why do the good suffer, the bad thrive? That kind of stuff. When you look at it, it doesn't, what we see is not that it's a 3 A's God that does anything, anytime, anywhere for anybody. If not, then God would be arbitrary. And what it comes down for is, and I thought this is still the most powerful, it's the most helpful thing to me in discerning what is going on, how God is operating the world, is that life is arbitrary, but God is not. And in Jesus, we see that these, she talks about in this video, Dr. Villa, the choices that Jesus made. Jesus made his choices, but those other people made choices too. They did not have to kill him. They did not have to do those things. They did not have to be, we act like they're puppets in God's plans, but they were not. They did not have to do this. Jesus did not have to be killed this way. And we say, oh, he had to satisfy the plan. And I'm saying, God always gets it done. And that is our theology after it happens, not before. Because then that takes away their points. And so God is the puppet master making things happen with Caiaphas and all these people. And see, I can't get my mind there. That's not a real God to me. It's a despot. But that in Jesus, in the image of God that we see in Jesus, we have that life is arbitrary. But God is steadfast and faithful and loving and caring. God always does the best, and this is the one time always does the best that God can do to bring about the best for creation. And that there are so many things at work: our will, your will, his will, the will of institutions and governments and all these things. There's so much stuff happening that when things do get right, it is truly a miracle of God, because God is not the one. God is the one that is always working for the good of creation and its redemption and to bring it to a whole place. But that in the garden here, those people had made up their minds, and God did not force them to do that. Judas did. Satan enters Judas, according to a couple. That this is not God killing Jesus. Jesus offers himself. And this is what we get. And God rewards him with resurrection. Not like payment, but because this is just how it was. if it was possible, God could have worked it out. Jesus would not have died this way. Might have died a happy old man with some grandkids and stuff like that if they hadn't taken his life. But when he offered it, so I have to believe that God did everything that God could to keep him from having to suffer this. And in his prayer, that's the thing of thy will be done. It's in spite of our ill will and our not playing along with God, that's the piece that we got to pray. Thy will be done in spite of maybe all the stuff that we do to hinder it. And sometimes not even knowing we're doing that we're hindering God's will, which is simply to love him and love our neighbor and whatever that looks like in our day. I mean, it's just, I can't get past that Jesus in this story, absolutely, that God had to have him to satisfy something for himself. That's not how we treat sons and daughters. It's not it. I don't know. Oh, but violence is no. Well, what else would you offer about tonight? That was my offering. That's what prayer. That's what praying. That I don't know how those people get it. I could not be a police officer.
I have a grandson that is, and that's Josh.
Yeah.
And his wife is, and I pray for them every day.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and even the police officer that's on the officers that are on trial for the George Floyd death, Derek Chauvin and the others. He had his chances to do right, and they're going to decide some fate for him. But I really feel for the people who were standing there that wanted to do something, but just could not because they wanted to. They could see it. They were there, and that's a horrible thing. Horrible. It's going to get bad too.
And I think one of the problems is that officer was trained to do exactly what he did. And that's some of the things that we need to change. We don't need that type of arresting and holding someone down by the head like that.
No, we don't. No. I worry about I don't want to start a debate, but I think there's times when they probably do need to use that chokehold, but I guess, where a lot of places have outlawed it, but but then you know what? If you don't do it right, it can turn out. They've shown it can be so bad. So, like you said, they've got to find other means, other ways, and so it's a wake up call. Hopefully,
yeah,
it is. Well, what have we learned throughout this time in this book? What are some lessons, some things that have stood out to you, and that you're glad that you either came across or saw or thought of or whatever? What were some things in this 6 weeks?
Roger, I think the studies have been just great. I enjoyed the book, and I really would not have thought that a Jewish person could have presented it the way that she presented it.
Oh, right. She's a serious scholar, man. I mean, she's bent on studying and she seeks truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the whole book and the whole study has just shown the human side of Jesus and his struggles and the relationship between him and God. And I mean, it has personally caused me to think a lot.
Okay.
Entering
Is there-
the.
Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Is there a time that Jesus actually called for violence? I mean, other than turning the tables over in the temple.
Well, but even then, when we talked about that, he wasn't advocating. It was I guess you say it's a violent act. It was whatever, but there also, it would be like considered like a prophetic enactment of something, like where they would, like in Jeremiah takes a pot and slams on the ground and busts it and says, "This is how you will be broken up into pieces as you go into exile." And so it's a prophetic thing, but he does this to say, like, to flip it, he's making a point.
Right.
It's like an exclamation mark kind of thing.
Right.
Not,
Okay.
because he never says like to come in here and like take down the temple. You know what I mean? In fact, because he loved the temple.
Right. But he didn't like seeing the abuse.
I will tell you this. We also hear stories about like, said like he could have taken his, said like, oh, he could have commanded the angels to come and take care of him and deliver him from this or whatever. But he says, no, I'm not, that's not what he did. That's another thing. So he wasn't going to do it by force. The other thing he talked about was with the zealots. When the zealots that were killed, when the Tower of Siloam fell on him, he said, hey, if you act this way, it's kind of like that. If you live by the sword, you perish by the sword. It's kind of the same thing. If you live like they did, same thing can happen to you. That if you want to be a zealot and you want to do a violent insurrection act, you're going to get taken down. And so he doesn't. But I think it's not that it's not about just being against violence. It's the truth about violence. Violence begets violence. Does that make sense?
Yes. Because it does.
Yeah, but
I mean, you're always going to pick a lower opponent
if you want to win. But the other thing is true change does not come through violence. And that's maybe idealistic and naive, but true change, you can't force change. Change, you got to have the right processes to bring the change. But if somebody, honestly, if somebody's being beaten on the street, I think I'm going to try to intervene and take that guy out. And I'm going to have to use violence to get him off. You know what I'm saying? I can't, at school, if a kid is beating another kid up, I'm going to have to restrain the kid even violently if I have to do that.
Right.
It's not like it's a prohibition against it. It's about you got to carefully consider its use. There's a thing, just war theory, where there's 7 points, and they use this actually even for the Gulf War, right? Not the first, but when Bush did, they talked about just war theory and using just war theory to have it. And it's a Christian thing people come up with. It's an ethical thing. And if you meet these criteria, then it's a just action that we could go to war. So just war theory is a real thing, but it's not a perfect thing, but it's because things can be skewed. But even then, I mean, we're supposed to weigh like actions now. If a president decides to, when Biden bombs the Syrian targets, did they go through any process for that? That was like, is this really justified? Or did they do it just because, oh, they're doing this, we got it? I don't know that they did. I can't say they did or didn't, but there's supposed to be a process that they go through to say whether it's really justified or not, because they have to be able to hold up to scrutiny. Bev, what were you going to say just a second ago?
Oh gosh, I think what I was going to say was looking back at the title of the book, entering the passion of Jesus, and I think we really need to land on that word passion. We need to have passion for our life, just like he had passion for what he was doing. We need to be that dedicated.
I hear you. And it's just not like, his suffering was just not on that day. That was the great physical suffering, but we see suffering in Gethsemane. We hear some of his suffering, maybe even in like the anointing stuff from last week with the woman, where he talks about my death. we see his suffering as just as many do when he was grieving over Lazarus. If we didn't share that story, and so many other stories that we did not share. If you read the afterwards, she brings up a lot of points. We don't get to hear about the farewell discourse in Matthew and the sheep and the goats and all those things, and but that Jesus suffered more, just suffered throughout his life in different ways, like we do. Felt the same kind of angst about situations, felt the same kind of grief that we feel for ourselves and for others. There's not the idea of temptations and what he faced to just drop it and walk away. She writes it, right? He could have just said no. If he couldn't say no, then it was fake in a sense to me. You know what I mean? Like if he had no choice, then it's not an offering. If you don't have a choice, but he did what he did out of his love in relationship with God. He was that dedicated, and he was obedient, perfect in obedience, in every way tempted as we are, yet was perfect in obedience. Hebrews. All right. Well, what else? What else? Are any lessons stand out or anything to you? Okay. Well, tomorrow night, I'll send a link. I'll go ahead and do the links now and send them out for tomorrow and for Friday. And tomorrow and Friday are not going to be, we'll do some reading. We'll have a brief commentary, but what I would, I'll send some notes out with the link in terms of I want you to think about these things and consider this. I'll send the scripture links with it and all, but it's just going to be more a get together. Not like a Tenebrae service or something like that, but it's just going to be a time for us that we're observing Holy Week together. And we're just, maybe we're like doing what Peter, James, and John, Jesus asked him to do. Can you not just hang out with me during this week and help me get through it? That kind of thing, where he asked him to stay a while and just pray with him, just to be there with their friend. Yeah. So maybe that's really all I see us doing. We're just trying to honor him and be present. All right. That wind is rocking outside my house right now.
I can hear it. Wow.
It is here too.
Is it blowing hard? Okay. Well, I was telling you, they got their, you may have heard me telling Cindy that they're going to have their bathroom done. Looks like maybe middle of April, which is ahead of time. So we can start getting their stuff over there. I just got with Gary Tickle today trying to get propane tank in the ground so we can get propane to the hot water tank and stuff like that. But so we're moving along, trying to get there.
Yeah, that porta john might get kind of rocky with this wind.
Yeah, gotta have a toilet, man. Holy cow. Yeah, we'd have to tie that thing down. Yes. That's why you just want one old cat hole in the ground there. Throw some lime and go. That's right. Oh, well, any requests tonight? Anything you want to share or pray about?
Yeah, for the last couple of weeks now, I've been, my first cousin, Bill Bandy, who goes to the Pembroke Christian Church with Reggie, he's got throat cancer. And I think Robin may have said something about it when we were gone, perhaps. But please keep Bill in your prayers, please.
Okay.
Treatments, but he won't be able to.
Well, that's rough.
Yeah.
What else? Mitzi, how you feeling today? How's Stubby?
I'm blue and he won't stop. He still patrols the grounds.
Does he?
Yeah, he does it 3 or 4 times. My backyard and Dan's too.
Okay.
Just like he always has. He's just not eating.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, he's doing his thing.
Yeah. We're going to put him up there next to the building so he can look down on the house like he always sits on the ramp there in front of the building.
Right.
Stutz is up there too.
Stutz is still the coolest cat I've ever been around.
Yeah,
That was
he's
a cool
pretty
cat.
cool.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else?
Oh, I do have one thing.
Yeah.
My first cousin in North Carolina, my dad's sister's child, the only one I have left.
Yeah.
She lost her best friend and she's in a bad depression.
Okay.
She's also trying to recover from broken thoracic vertebrae, so she's not allowed to get out of bed.
Okay. All
Her
right.
name's Kathy. It's Kathy Sowers.
Got it. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's pause again. Lord, as we do continue to mull over what we've read, what we've heard from one another, what we have heard within the depths of our own minds and hearts, as we continue to mull these things over, may they serve as a fertilizer, as a catalyst, something that would continue to grow the likeness of you within us, that be as that angel that came and strengthened you on that night, that it would be that way for us, so that we might be able to face our own living and our own path with a wholehearted mind, that we might see more clearly the ways that we can, but also the ways that we do serve you each day. That which way those moments when we are fully yours and bringing your love into this world. We're mindful of Bill tonight and Kathy. And we continue to entrust those we love to you, because you showed us how much you love and you care in and through Jesus. Thank you, O Lord, for having such a faithful and obedient son, for being such a good Abba, and giving him the good gifts, and for those gifts that he has shared with us. And so on this night, O God, may it not be dark within us, but may your light shine. May we not be less than what we can be for you. In your son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Yes, I'll send links out. I'll send what we're going to read tomorrow night.
7 o'clock tomorrow.
We'll look at John tomorrow night. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But I'll send that out. And then on Good Friday, I'm probably going to ask the different people to read. But if you can't be there on Friday night, Gene, you guys are leaving when?
Not till Saturday.
Okay, so then, and listen, and so we'll need to do the stewardship moment, won't we?
No, I can do it on Zoom.
Isn't that it's great to be able to do that though. I'm telling you.
I was planning on doing it from there.
All right, very good, awesome, yes. And so, okay, good. I'm glad I know that now. But I'll ask you to read some stuff with me and join me in that on Friday night. Okay. All righty. Well, have a good night, everyone.
Don't blow away.
No, I'm
Thank
not-
you, Roger.
Do what?
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you all. I love you
Hey.
guys.
Hey, we still doing sunrise?
Oh, I forgot to look at the time. Yeah, I'll have to. Good. Thank you for saying that.
It's about 6:45.
6:45.
It's when the sun comes up.
Okay, that's when we'll meet. And we'll just be on the patio there. All right.
Yeah,
Good deal.
I have an agenda for next Wednesday's board meeting also. So if you have anything that you want on there, anyone, just let me know.
I will do it. All right.
I do have on there already new business about getting someone to mow the grass.
Yeah, and I passed it on to a guy if he wanted to bid on it, but he didn't hear anything from him. So, well, I did say he said he wanted something closer to Radford. That's what he told me. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
See you tomorrow evening.
Go Gonzaga.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, John boy.
Good night.
bless.
Friends. Good night. It won't quit now. I'm clicking on it. It won't quit.